Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Veda, for the introduction and the context. Thank you all for joining. I'm very excited that we are able to put this session together, even though it's still in virtual format. But I think we'll try to make the most of the next 3 or 4 hours. What I thought I'll do today is, in a way, give you my report card and the company's performance report card and how the teams have actually rallied around the last difficult 12, 15 months and then talk a little bit about what's worked for us, what we are hearing from our clients, and most importantly, how we plan to get through the next financial year that we just started back in April. So if I kind of look back at the year, it's been in a way exciting, of course, tragic year. It's something that all of us have learned to deal with. Still, sometimes I have to pinch myself thinking about what we are going through, especially with the current second wave going through in India. So before I start, I want to call out each and every one of our team members, our employees, who've gone above and beyond, in the last 12, 18 months to keep our client operations running, to support each other, to bring empathy to work every day, and a huge, huge call out to many of our leaders who've just, displayed true grit and character. Also very, very distressed that we've lost some of our you know, dear colleagues. And we are doing everything we can at Mphasis and as a leadership team to support the families and the ones who still need our help. So keep them in your prayers and your thoughts as we get through this phase. But I just wanted to call them out before I got started. If you move forward to the next slide, I think this is a fairly profound prediction that came true about a year before, a year before it had called out the 2021 AD with virtual e-learning. It just shows you that amongst us there are certain, real imaginative folks that have called out certain trends, and I think if anything, this is just an inspiration for us that we need to keep looking around corners and identify those trends that definitely give us food for thought. So I thought I'll share on a lighter note and start with that. If you move forward and kind of talk a little bit about the bet, the bets that companies make and how that plays out on their value, it's very clear. And this chart can go back 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. The crisis playbook and the fact that firms need to continue to look around corners to innovate, and the market eventually rewards them. And I think this is something that we've seen really accelerate in the last 12 months, as you can see from this chart here. I'm glad that we were able to call some of these trends ahead of time. We were ready with a set of services and offerings as the crisis hit. In many cases, we were probably a little bit more forward-leaning than our clients were. But as they all started thinking about how to respond and react to the crisis, I think we were able to actually give them the support, and that's translated into some real strong performance for us, and I'll outlay that in the next few minutes. If you look at move to the next slide. If you look at the trends that are front and central, again, none of these should be a surprise to you. Whether it happens to be acceleration of digital adoption, it happens to be acceleration of move to cloud, adoption of AI, IoT and edge computing, data being central to everything. Of course, we've seen some consolidation in the industry, transformation of operations. So these are underlying pivots that already were underway, but it got massively accelerated, I would say, through the last 18 months. And I think this has a profound implication on some of the bets that we had made, starting earlier on. But if you look at what this has meant for us, it has definitely meant that the total addressable market for the industry has gone up, because almost every aspect of every business is in a way tech enabled, tech driven. Technology isn't just a back office function. We've been talking about it for a long time with our front to back construct, which all of you are familiar with. So that basically means that almost every aspect of every business architecture is now run by technology, whether it's in front of the consumer, whether it's in the back office, whether it sits in the middle with the data-driven design and architecture. A lot of new investment is going into new platforms. A lot of new investment is going into consumer-facing applications. A lot of investment is also going into agility, resilience, and of course, modernization. I think the second bullet point here about the acceleration and shift in IT spend is probably the biggest impact that we had bet on, and I'll detail that out in a slide in a minute or two. But it's very clear that the consumption pattern for tech is moving very rapidly towards consumer on demand. Whether it happens to be cloud or SaaS, and we don't see that trend anything but continuing to stay accelerated. And that has a profound implication on service providers, profound implication on technology providers, software vendors, and of course, device makers. So that's something that we think we were probably well suited to impact as we got into the crisis. Thirdly, I think we've also seen almost every large client, every large buyer of tech services having gone through a reassessment of their strategic partnerships. Of course, in some cases, this is a regular exercise, but I think the crisis really accelerated that. And I think they're also looking for not just what we call capacity providers anymore. They're not looking for functional expertise. They're also looking for partnerships that can be more strategic. You guys are in the middle of those discussions every day, so I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, but we've seen, at least in all of our top relationships and many of the new ones, we've seen a desire to be a lot more strategic in the way we engage, the way they want us to engage. And most importantly, I think our stance of bringing opinions and thought leadership is really something that has been very well received. So I think this trend will also continue to accelerate. We will continue to see clients demanding a lot more strategic connect with the providers, and more importantly, expect the providers to bring some ideas and thought leadership to them. And I think finally, while global delivery is not a new concept, I think the structural tailwinds due to remote work have only strengthened that concept. Clearly, there is a good tailwind towards higher offshore, towards higher remote work. We've also used this time to set up additional delivery centers that I think can be very handy as we look at diversity of talent, and of course time zone coverage with the new normal. So I think these are things that kind of in a way the impact that we've seen and we continue to kind of work through. If you move to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about the bets we had made going back 2017. I briefly touched upon the first item, which was the shift in consumption. I think the need of the hour from the businesses to the CIOs is agility. Can I launch product quicker? Can I launch functionality changes, almost on a daily basis instead of waiting for every 3 months? Can we do drops every day? So it's not a surprise that this whole revolution towards agile is something that had started but got accelerated. More importantly, resilience is equally important as is agility. And I think right in the middle of all of this sits the consumer. And I think most of the disruption really is coming from the consumer expectation shifting. And I think we typically, we've said this before and I'll say it again, every business is a consumer business, and some just realized it in the last 12 months. Customer loyalty is no longer, if you're a business that services, any form of consumer, B2B, B2B2C, B2C, the loyalty of your consumer is no longer to your brand. The loyalty is to their experience with you, in dealing with you. So I think bulk of this disruption really is coming from consumer expectations shifting as they're getting a lot more integrated with the digital devices. And finally, the third big bet was it's never about cost, but it's always about cost. How do you shift the dynamic between run and change? How do you find operating levers from within their existing cost base for our clients? And I think we made a huge bet that self-funding transformation is a huge lever. And we have a go-to-market motion called zero-cost transformation that I'll talk about as well. So I think these were the big bets we made. In many cases, we were already aligning towards this as a service revolution. We were already, we had already set up a significant amount of competency through leading with architecture, design, and engineering. It's non-trivial to go from on-prem to as a service. What kind of construct do you need? What kind of architecture design you have? What's your infrastructure play? How do you secure these applications? How do you transform the application estate if it has to be away from your control in your data center? So how do you lead with that design construct is something that we spend a lot of time and effort on. And I think we were ready with a lot of these constructs. And you see here some of the bets we made starting FY18 have basically given us a very consistent growth pattern on a sequential quarter-over-quarter basis. So this is quarterly revenue. And I think the Barring the June quarter last year, we've actually had probably one of the most consistent track records in the industry. Obviously, this is something that we take very seriously. We hold ourselves to a standard of constant currency, sequential, quarter-over-quarter organic revenue growth, and this is really an outcome of everything we do. This obviously is something that we have to continue to live for. And let me break this down into where this came from. If you move to the next slide, you'll see that we have a direct business, which is kind of 86% of our revenues as of March 21, which is kind of the business that effectively is strategic direct relationships, and the other part of our business is what we call DXC, which obviously is the relationship we carried on forward from the HP Enterprise Services days. The engine of growth for us really has been our direct business, which has actually had industry-leading growth and grew at about 17% last fiscal, with the growth in the last quarter of 19.9% on a YOY basis. By far best in class, at least compared to our industry and our peer group. And of course, the growth has come from our top 20 accounts. Specifically, in the top 10 have grown at about 13.5% CAGR. This was in year ended March 21. If you look at the top 5, they've grown at 13. If you look at the next 5, they've grown at 42. If you look at the next 10, it's 11 to 20, they've actually grown at 16. So I think we've continued to see some real traction with our large relationships. Many of you know our large clients. Many of you will hear from them today. Most of you will, many of those clients will be here. Most of you have interacted with some of them before. What's obviously driving that also is our growth in Europe. So not only are we growing these large accounts, we are also starting to grow a new region. That growth has been for the year has been around 25%. For Q4, it was around 29%. And we've also started to see, continued traction from our new client acquisition engine, what we are calling NCA here, which is really, the hunting side of the business. And I think that's, while on a small base, is growing at about 70% on a CAGR basis last 3 years, which is again very strong engine of growth. So broad-based growth across industries, across geographies. Banking has grown 23+% for us in a COVID year. Of course, we benefited from being in the right segments. Because banking was probably one of the least impacted industries, in the last 12, 18 months. If you move forward again, we'll talk a little bit about the client metrics. I think we are very proud that we have one of the best-in-class customer metrics. Many of our stock analysts, financial market analysts, see this as concentration risk. We see this as strategic move. I'm fairly unapologetic about the fact that we've grown all of our top 5 accounts and we are now at a point where average revenue across top 5 accounts is over 100 million, with all 5 of them actually over 75 million relationships. So our conversion ratio in moving clients through our revenue buckets is actually best in class at over 50%, which means that more than 50% clients move from one bucket to the next. And I think this is true power of our alignment, our understanding, and our ability to lead clients through deep tech and bring opinions to them. So keep this in mind as we look at the industry metrics. Again, as I mentioned, in our peer group, this is one of the best metrics with some of the stickiest relationships that we've built over the last 20 plus years. And all of our top 5 clients, the average tenure is actually high teens in terms of number of years with us. If you keep moving to the next one, we'll see a little bit about of what is driving underneath. The story of our last financial year has really all been about acceleration in deal wins. For the year, we've closed 1.1 billion in net new TCV. And all of our TCV numbers are net new, which means we do not include renewals because we like to keep this as a pure metric. That's a 51% growth over last fiscal. Last 5 quarters in a row, we've actually declared 200 million plus. We also announced a new large deal of 250 million that we closed in the last month or so. That was after the March quarter. As you can also see, at a fairly consistent clip in the middle graph here, we've been able to close large deals defined as 20 million or higher, almost 1 to 2 every quarter. But interestingly, the average size of those deals has started to go up pretty dramatically. We've almost taken it 2.5 times in the last 2 years. So from 31 million, it's now at 79 million average size of the large deal. And I think what that really means on a trailing 12-month basis, what that really means is we are getting longer-term deals. We are also getting more strategic transformation deals that go beyond 1 year in most cases. What's driving this? What's driving this really is the tribes construct that all of you are well familiar with, that we've talked a lot about. We've reconstituted 8 tribes, and I'll talk about that in a minute or two. And each of these tribes are the building blocks of competency for us. They're the foundation of everything we do at the firm. And they come together in multiple groups when we spin up a squad for a customer engagement. They come together as we look at deal archetypes and transformation thesis. So I think the secret sauce for our success really is seated in the tribe and squad construct, but the tribes have been really effective in creating enterprise opinions and actually leading clients through many of these transformation programs. Move to the next one. This is kind of the construct that I was referring to. I think we coined this term, bring the T back in IT. The T stood for tech. Now the T is starting to morph into transformation. The foundation is these 8 tribes. Each of these 8 tribes has a tribes leader and a group a multifunctional cross-company group that comes together in a very agile, virtual manner. But at the same time, they really go deep in that subject. So DevOps, leading into everything as a platform or development of new platforms, leading into modernization, data, cybersecurity. Each of these are distinct building blocks, but the secret sauce isn't the fact that we have these 8 blocks. The secret sauce is how they come together in deal archetypes, and most importantly, how do we domain contextualize them in working through our industry vertical groups. And when we go to a client, it's actually a highly contextualized point of view and an opinion and a transformation roadmap. And I think the achievement of the last 18 months really has been the standardization of these deal archetypes and these GTM motions that give us a lot of repeatability, throughput, and applicability across multiple client types. Let me give you a couple of examples of those as we go forward. We can probably skip through this one because this is a detail of each of those tribes. But look at these 5 examples of what we call deal archetypes. Zero cost transformation is really the combination of cost takeout plus transformation, and it could be modernization, it could be data center migration to cloud, it could be data transformation. Essentially, the idea is shifting the needle between run and change, and then also being on the hook for actually deploying that transformation bundled into a common construct. So if you're a client, you're really effectively getting a pretty well-documented, well-architected solution, and most importantly, we're actually creating a commercial construct that passes a lot of the execution risk, from the client to us, which means we have to have the ability to actually execute at scale with that transformation program. We have a few interesting examples of that coming up. We obviously have taken it across multiple clients and multiple transformation type program. A good example of that is also contact center transformation that is kind of getting tagged along to zero cost right now. Second is about platforms. Think about building platforms. Don't think of building applications or even products. And the reason is every application that is sitting inside of a bank or an insurance company should be amenable to being consumed on demand, through microservices. So how do you take an application and open it up to a platform? And that's been a huge success for us, especially as companies have started to think about building new platforms that can be consumed on demand by the internal and the external counterparties. Service transformation is about a lot of transformation around costs. How do you modernize your IT operations? How do you modernize the predictive, preventive mindset? How do you move away from managing tickets to managing uptime? How do you use machine learning and pattern recognition to start predicting issues? Similar thing can be applied to operations. It's the enterprise, application of automation to your non-IT operations. And of course, DevOps has been the tip of the spear for us for better part of the last 2.5 years. Just few examples. I think we are still creating 80+% of our deals proactively, which means that we have a seat at the table when clients are thinking through what is the problem they're trying to solve, how best can they look at interventions. We help them think through it. We help them through assessments, proof of architectures, designs, sessions, solution studios. And yes, many of them go to RFP, but many of them, by the time they go to RFP, we've already had a very strong influence on that particular transformation roadmap. So I think that's really one of the other secret sauce items here. We'd love to get all the help we can get from all of you as you're looking at working with your clients in bringing some thought leadership as they think about some of these transformation programs. And of course, we've also seen a massive alignment with the C-suite as we've gone about taking over some of these transformation programs. Again, I'm just about to wrap up and we'll take a few questions. If move to the next one, I'll give you an example of how tribes have actually enabled us. This is, a third of our deals are 36%, of our growth is purely driven through the tribe construct. You can see what tribes are making, what kind of tribe deals are making up our pipeline right now. Despite record conversion, we're sitting on a record pipeline. A good example of a nice transformation deal that we signed, from a BFSI client standpoint, where the client has grown through multiple acquisitions. They have still silos operating on operations between middle and back office. The advisor is still spending too much time dealing with effectively paperwork because of many of the processes aren't fully integrated and are manual. So we are actually setting up a shared service entity that will cut across all of these operations, transform the advisor experience, implement workflow and automation to actually create a completely digitized, paperless workflow. We did a lot of that over the last 12 months because they had to go, fully remote. But right now, this is actually setting up industrial scales, operation that they can tag on new acquisitions to as well. A very exciting program, runs for 10 years. Strategic deal. I think a 10-year deal for a company of our ilk is not very common either. So very happy and very pleased. Quickly, what are the investments we are making over the next 12 months? One of the areas we identified in the next slide is the whole alignment with the hyperscalers and the cloud platforms. Again, not a surprise. We obviously do a lot of work with all of these platforms. We've seen massive growth through the uplift in our cloud-led transformation deals, almost a 40% growth, in the last financial year. We are well placed. In fact, industry-leading positioning when it comes to transformation services using cloud. We've started to expand our footprint with many of these providers. We are strategically placed, but we will invest a lot more in creating a channel ecosystem that we've already started investing, last year. Good examples of some of these partnerships, around Azure, Snowflake, AWS, Google, VMware, and of course, ServiceNow. These are some of the prime platforms that we're working with. Just a summary in the next slide on our next year initiatives. We've obviously talked about the innovation mindset. We'll continue to invest in building, bringing IP assets to the market. We are embedding these in many of our deal archetypes. This is the secret sauce that helps us continue to move forward and differentiate as we align, a lot of the IP assets to the tribes that we work with. Finally, in the last slide, a quick summary of our initiatives. Again, things that, let's probably stay with this given the paucity of time. I think we'll continue to expand capability. We've talked about tribes and squads. We've talked about cloud. We've talked about continuing to build domain, and most importantly, talent transformation through the masses, through our TalentNext program that I've talked to you about before. Massive acceleration in adoption of TalentNext in the last 12 months. We've talked about geography expansion. We announced a pretty large expansion into the UK. We have another expansion, on the table that we'll be announcing next week for Canada. In the last 12 months, we've also expanded delivery into other geographies, Taiwan, Mexico, Costa Rica, Estonia, and Poland included. We will continue to use these to strategically load balance and, of course, get talent diversity. We've expanded leadership. We are hiring new folks in some of these new geographies. We've added 3 new leaders to the leadership team in the last 3 months. You met many of them. You will meet many of them, later on today. And finally, I think the IP assets that we talked about will continue to power a lot of our growth. So I think we are expanding. This is an exciting time to be at Mphasis. I'm really glad we got an opportunity to present our report card to you and in a way kind of give you a little bit of a flavor of from my vantage point, what are we driving towards. Thank you again for joining us today. Hope you enjoy the next 3 hours, and I'm happy to take a few questions right now.
Thank you, Nitin. We have 2 questions that have come in from the attendees. One of which you have partially answered when you spoke about your plans for expansion in UK and Nordics. But Akhila from HFS wants to understand what would our growth trajectory be in Europe, and if you can throw some light on that. So I'll let you answer the first one, and then I'll take you to the next.
Yeah, I think if you look at the last 12 months, we've grown about 25% on a YY basis. And we've also guided for our direct business growth to be at industry leading, which means we're looking at a pretty elevated level of growth, higher than even last year. So Europe is definitely part of that. So I would expect Europe to continue to grow well above company growth and potentially industry leading growth metrics in Europe as well. not very different from the kind of growth we saw last year. Interesting thing though is it's not just, it was led by UK. I think we started to see some interesting deals come out of the Europe, the continent. There was a large deal in our March quarter that we actually signed in the Nordics. We are starting to think about using some of these reference clients as beachheads. So that's the plan. That's our Horizon 2-3 strategy outside of UK and France, where we already have a big presence.
Thank you, Nitin. The next question is from Nitesh Mittal, and he wants to know what has defined the large deal momentum for us in terms of the action undertaken by Mphasis, be it talent or better solutioning or any frameworks.
I think it's all of the above, Akhilesh. Most importantly, showing up to a client with a well-formed, baked opinion of what we think they should be doing as they look to transition the IT consumption is probably the biggest differentiation. I think we called it shift left, which means can we get closer and closer to the source of definition of the problem versus wait for the client to define the problem, bundle it in RFP, and then call providers. So I think getting a seat at that table where we can actually have an influence in the way they're thinking about these transformation programs. And then, of course, we have to do a lot of work before we get there, and that's the reason why, the whole architecture, design, engineering, squad, tribe, IP assets, all of that kind of goes into that construct. And of course, we have to then also create a design to delivery framework, because in the end, we have to deliver those transformation programs, not just sell them. So I think it's a lot of that. I think innovation is right in the middle of that. Differentiation, as you know, in our industry is hard. But I think we've really done a good job of differentiating ourselves through some of these constructs that we've created.
Thank you, Nitin. And the last question to you today would be from Neil Barton. He's from Gartner, and he wants us to share some insights on Blackstone's recent reinvestment into Mphasis.
Again, we're very excited about the fact that when your largest shareholder, who has a controlling stake, is fully convinced that this isn't a time to exit but to reinvest. That's the best validation that a management team can think of. So that's exactly what Blackstone has done. In a way, what they've done is they've moved the investment from one of their earlier funds into two of their new funds. And alongside, they've brought on 3 new sovereign investors, 2 sovereign and 1 pension investor. GIC of Singapore, a sovereign fund from Singapore, Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, a sovereign fund for Abu Dhabi, and University of California Regions, which is the pension plus endowment for University of California, are the 3 new co-investors alongside Blackstone's 2 new funds. What this really does is Blackstone's commitment, extends in a way for another 5 to 7 years, because they see Mphasis as a quote-unquote core holding in their portfolio, only one of its type in the entire global private equity portfolio, and continues to continue to feel that there's a lot more value creation opportunity available, especially given the momentum that we are seeing. So the theme for that investment is continuity and acceleration, and we're very excited with that validation.
I'm sorry, Nitin, I thought that would be the last question for you, but we have 2 or 3 more lined up, so I'm going to just give them to you.
Sure.
One of which has come in from Vamshi, and he wants to know sustainability frameworks are accelerating across industries. What are the new services we're thinking about in this area for future?
Interesting question. I don't have a straight answer for that. I think if you're thinking sustainability from an ESG form, I think there's obviously a lot of focus on how do you reduce the footprint. Early days, more to come on that. So we'll probably have to kind of take that up in one of our subsequent conversations.
Lastly, there's a question from David, and he wants to know, can you give a volume metric on terms for a typical average sweet spot deal? Example, $96 million USD over 60 months.
So I think typically, if you see the average size of our deals has gone up to about 70 million, and the average duration, I would say at this point in time, is around 3 years, a little bit more than 3 years. So that's kind of the way you should think about it, which is why what we also do is we give out the correlation between TCV wins and revenue growth. At this point in time, the correlation is at a record high of 91%, so 0.91. So I think that should give you a sense that a lot of these deals are a good mix of, shorter term 1 to 2 year deals, but also, 5-7 year deals. So that's why the average ends up being in the 3 to 4 year range.
Thank you so much, Nitin. Any questions that go unanswered, we will definitely respond and share our responses with you separately and maybe even with the larger audience. With this, Nitin, I thank you for your keynote and I am really looking forward to you spending the rest of the day with us. Uh, I invite now Aditya Chatty to take us through the next session where we have clients who will speak to us about leading design and architecture. Over to you, Chatty.